Have to check. Sounds good. Okay, I would say let's start. Thank you very much, Oyin, for joining us today. I'm really nervous. Don't you do that very often in English, but I'm really glad you take the time to answer our questions. We read, this is the German edition, but My Sister, the Serial Killer, like the whole month, I think. You saw a bit of what we talked about, but it was all German, so it was fine. But yeah, we're looking forward to talking to you about this book. I really enjoyed it. It was my second time reading it, and yeah, thank you for being here.
It's my pleasure. Hello, everyone. Haven't said hi yet, but thank you for having me.
I collected a few questions beforehand, and I think it's always a good start. I don't know if you can ask that multiple times, but I think it's easier to start with how the book came to be. Where did that idea come from? And just let us know.
Yeah, so how did it come about? Okay, so I think 10 years prior to writing it, I was writing a collection of poetry, and at the time, I had also come across the Black Widow spider. And for those who don't know, the female spider is usually slightly bigger than the male spider, and after mating, if she's hungry and he's still hanging around, she will eat him. And I thought this was hilarious. It made such a huge impression on me. So I wrote a poem called Black Widow Spider. And then I wrote another poem, which was sort of based on the more stereotypical idea of the Black Widow, a woman who marries men and poisons them and maybe acquires their wealth. Or actually don't know where I read, you know, those sort of, but I wrote a poem about that, about a woman who who's very beautiful, who was marrying these wealthy men, and her friend was the only one who knew what she was doing, and that she would then kill these men. And it was all, you know, she was keeping that secret, but then of course they fall, or they get interested, they become interested in the same man, which was when, you know, problems begin to ensue. So this was another poem. It wasn't My Sister, the Serial Killer. And actually these characters were, I think they were all white. Were they? I don't know. I think they were, some of them were white, or all of them were white. I don't remember. But so 10 years later, when I was writing My Sister's Serial Killer, those poems were kind of like the foundation. I knew where I was going because they were there, and the story changed. It became a very Nigerian story. They were sisters instead of friends, but there were some things that I drew, you know, I relied on those poems as inspiration for.
It's really interesting that you talked about the Black Widow spider, because one of the book club team members, she didn't create the cocktail, but she chose the cocktail for our book club meeting. That was Black Widow.
Yeah.
So, yeah, very fitting then. Is that a poem? Can we read that poem somewhere, or is it just in your private collection?
It was, I actually, I think I was 19 or 18 at the time, and I self-published a collection of poetry. So they're somewhere in, you know, but yeah, it's not like they're easily accessible necessarily, but I still actually like that particular, I mean, there are a lot of poems in that anthology I would probably deny if anyone, you know, brought them to me, but I actually still like that poem. It's one of the poems, at least the Black Widow Spider poem is one of the poems that I still, I feel like, oh, you know, you didn't do a bad job there. So yeah.
Yeah, we'll have to research on that one. How long did you write My Sister, the Serial Killer?
Okay, so this is a question that usually makes me a little bit uncomfortable, just because, so it took me, the first draft, so when I first wrote My Sister's Serial Killer, it was a novella, so it was half the size that it is now, and it had a different name, and I had different, I wasn't planning for it. I didn't think anybody would pick it up. I wasn't sending it out or anything. It was just something I sort of wrote for myself. So the first draft, the one that's half the size that you have, took me about a month to write, which, you know, is pretty fast, but bear in mind, I also had those poems, and the second poem was like a roadmap for the book. And I think when you do have a roadmap, it helps you, you know where you're going. So you're almost just fleshing out the story and figuring out what works and what doesn't work. So the first draft took about a month, and then several things transpired. I'm talking to an agent, and she suggests, she says, look, I should try and see if I can turn it into a novel. And if she still likes it, then she would sign me on. So yeah, it took about another month to double it. And yeah, so that was a complete first draft. And then obviously you go through the editing process, but the entirety of that first draft, I would say it took 2 months, but not 2 months in, succession, but 2 months.
Wow, quite impressive. You published it as an ebook in Nigeria first. I think I read on like the first page of the book.
Yeah, so the novella format, like I said, I wasn't trying to get it traditionally published. So I had, so when I was done with the novella, I published that mostly just to see how people would respond to it, and just to get it out there whilst I was working on what I thought was going to be my debut. And I was like, nobody's going to pick this up, nobody's going to publish it. I guess I just thought it was a little bit too quirky, and I wanted to create something that was deeper and more memorable and grander. So I was working on that. I was working on this fantastic, grand resistance, and I self-published this novella, yeah, and I ended up. It was actually a friend of mine who was like, she thought that this was one of the best things I had written, which at the time I was a little bit offended by. But that's sort of the reason, she's the reason I sort of took it off the platform and decided to send it to this agent and see if, because they had reached out to me previously. So I just wanted to see if what they thought of it, I guess.
And like how did you feel after it was published? What changed for you? Because it's been quite big, hasn't it? Like all over the place, really. I think it's been big in Germany and the UK. So yeah, did you expect that?
No, it just goes to show that I think one thing I've learned is that, to be authentic and to be honest in your writing, and whatever will happen, will happen. There's no way for, I think, to necessarily predict what people are going to respond to and what they're not going to respond to. So I don't think writing My Sister the Serial Killer, I thought it was a very sort of, what's the word? Just myopic story. I thought it was very narrow. But the amount of people who have connected to it, the amount of women who connect to it, who connect to the sisters, it made me realize that it wasn't as myopic as I thought, and that at the end of the day, we all share the same sort of human experiences. So despite the fact that it's a different culture, different race, and a culture that not a lot of people are familiar with, because there's some cultures we're familiar to seeing via movies or the books that we generally read. So I wouldn't have thought that this book would have gone as far as it did, but I was pleasantly surprised. I mean, it was good for me financially, but I was also pleasantly surprised by the general response from people.
Yeah, that was something that came up in the comments. I think I saw it. Yeah, I think so. That people weren't sure if that's a normal like setup they lived in, if it was normal that these sisters still lived at home.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe you can give us a bit of background.
Okay, so like in England, for example, you know, I think here it's very common for, you know, once you've hit like 18 to kind of be out of the house and doing your own thing. Nigeria is not like that. Nigeria, you pretty much trying to think of, I think it's different for men and women, but even for men, especially now, I guess, because economically it's not as even convenient necessarily, but Nigerian parents won't really chase you from the house until you're married. Like, they want you to leave to get married. That's the best way you can say it. They want you to leave when you're getting married. Anything before that, especially if you're a female, but even so for men, they won't chase the man out necessarily until they're like, oh, he's got a girlfriend, he's serious about her, you know, he needs to get his own place. So sometimes, you know, the guy is earning enough and he's comfortable, there's no need for him to, and once he wants to move, he'll get an apartment or his own place. Sometimes the men will just, maybe coming back from university, they'll decide to get their own place. But nobody is necessarily pushing, like there's no pressure to do that. So you can, but they're comfortable with the men doing it, not so much with the women living on their own prior to marriage. So some women do it, but it's not encouraged in the same way. So you could be earning the most money and still be living at home, and nobody's going to say anything about that, whether you're a female or a male. It's not necessarily about how much you're earning, just, you know, they're not pushing you out.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think it's similar here as it is in the UK. It's more normal to leave home, maybe not at 18 necessarily, but well, for uni I would say probably would probably leave. So yeah, that's really interesting. I guess dating and getting to know each other is different than if you meet family right away.
It is very different. In fact, like I mean, I've grown up in both environments, but I'm still, you know, like just having people say like they're in the, like their boyfriend stayed over, for example. To me, I'm still like, oh, your parents were there, they were in the house. So yeah, it's still a lot that there's a massive difference in dating and how that all pans out.
Yeah, I can imagine. And that's really interesting. I really like having or feeling like dipping into another country, another culture, getting like a little bit to know how it is in another part of the world. And I didn't really know much about Nigeria beforehand. I read or we together as a book club read Americana, which partly takes place in Nigeria, but still, if you've never been there, it's so difficult to imagine.
Yeah.
Which is also why I would really look forward to the, what is it, like, I think a TV series or a TV show that's going to be filmed, or is it filmed at the moment for My Sister, the serial killer?
I mean, it was optioned for a movie, even though I would probably really have liked the TV show as well. It was optioned for a movie, but I mean, I don't know if it's still in the works, so I don't know if it's gonna go ahead or, you know, there's still a lot in the air as far as that's concerned.
Yeah, we have to have later on movie night for that one. Yes, really, I would be really excited for that. But I think another question that popped up was, or we talked a lot about these sisters, and their relationship is quite special, I would say, quite intense. And someone asked if you had a sister yourself, if that's something you're familiar with. Probably not if that's like your story, but still, if some of that influenced the book.
Yeah, I mean, I've got 2 sisters and a brother, and I'm the eldest, so I could definitely empathize with Korede to some extent. I think being the eldest child in Nigeria comes with a lot of weight and with a lot of responsibility. So from that perspective, it was really easy for me to inhabit a space where, even though my siblings have thankfully never killed someone, to just imagine what it would be like, you know, and the internal struggles you might have if they did, you know. And I think also with sisters, and even to some extent with my brother, but my brother is so much younger than me. There are 13 years between us. So most especially with my sisters, I think that, you know, I love them fiercely, but there are times when I really want to shake them. And, you know, there's just that dichotomy that I think a lot of sisters, you know, people have said, I get that, I understand that, where you can love someone and, you know, be infuriated by them or frustrated by them, or, you know, not want to talk to them sometimes. So that also came really naturally to me, I think, writing this particular story.
Yeah, I can imagine that too. It's, I guess they're quite close because of their history as well, and they had to stick together, but it's nonetheless a special relationship. Another question, I don't know if you can answer it, but we talked a lot about the cover. I shared like all the covers you had on your website as well, or most of them at least. And since you can see a knife like reflecting in the glasses, there were lots of like speculation about who's on the cover. I would have said, I'm not sure if I can pronounce the name correctly.
Ayola.
But, is that Ayola?
Yeah, it's more of like a, it's Ayola, if you want
Ayola,
to say,
sorry.
Yeah, no, I didn't have a lot of involvement in cover. In fact, I think initially I wasn't even too sure about it, because I don't necessarily gravitate towards books that have faces on them, because I feel like it gets in the way of me imagining what the character looks like. So I was like, I don't know, but everybody loved the cover, and it was actually the US guys who came up with the cover. And the UK guys were like, we love this cover. Like, usually we're very quick to create our own. We usually can't stand what the US covers look like, but we love this cover. So it was unanimous, and like, see, the Germans took it on. Like, a lot of other, a lot of the European countries were also like, we're happy with it. So yeah, at first I've grown to love it. But at first I was a little bit resistant. So I'm not sure I think like you, it has to be Ayola, even though, you know, there's no record that Korede has ever witnessed her do something like that. At least, yeah. But I'm trying to remember my own book. But yeah, I think it's probably Ayola that's on that. That's doing that. Thank you.
While,
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like it too, and I think most covers had a face on them, didn't they? Like some way or another.
Yeah, most of them did. Yeah.
Yeah, but I do understand that you say you feel like we have a picture in mind beforehand before even reading it. Yeah, but it's a cover I would grab in the bookshop, so I really like it too. And maybe that's a good point to at least show the other book, your second one.
Yeah.
The Baby Is Mine is in English, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it has faces on it as well, and it's also kind of like the same style, I would say. Yeah. But we'll get to that in a minute. I just have to check the questions that were asked beforehand, so I don't miss any of those. Or if you have any questions, just go ahead. Oh yeah, we talked about.
I think somebody has their hand.
Oh yes, sorry. Anne, you go ahead.
Yes, hello. You talked about your sisters and your brother, and what feedback did you get from your family about your book?
Well, okay, so my sister, so the one after me, some people who know us were immediately like, oh, you know, she's the serial killer, isn't she? It's her. And at first she thought it was funny, and then after a while she stopped finding it funny. But she was they were all kind of just very excited for me, because I've been writing all my life, so they were excited to see, you know, this happen for me. My parents took a little bit longer to read it, because my parents and I have had this understanding whereby I would write dark things and they just wouldn't read it, because they were just like, we don't understand what's going on. We don't know why you're writing these types of stories. Why can't you write something happy? You know, people just fall in love and live happily ever after. And so they kind of, you know, for their own peace of mind, they would tend to, so it took them a bit longer to read this book. And I have a picture actually of my dad looking at it, reading it for the first time, and just looking kind of grim. But they were both, I mean, they both said they had really enjoyed it. And I remember my mom, there's a line in the book where I think Korede says, this is when they've dumped the body into the lagoon, and Korede says, at least he won't be lonely. And my mom was like, oh, she said it sounded like me, like she could hear it. Which I thought was a really weird of all things, but yeah, they seem to really enjoy it, so that was good.
I think Lydia is going to write some questions and translate them, so I'll just put in the one.
Viel besser, wenn ich sage. Genau, meine erste Frage wäre, also ob es wird ja als feministische Rache-Story quasi an dem Vater, ich bin ein bisschen später hergekommen. Falls es schon gefragt worden ist, sag's mir Bescheid, ja? Also es ist ja eine feministische Rache-Story an dem Vater sozusagen, an dem gewaltsamen Vater, dass sie sich dann an den Männern rächen. Ist schon geklärt, ob Korede den Vater umgebracht hat?
Okay. So I think it was written on the back or in some quotes that is a feminist revenge story, and Lydia wants to know if it's clear that Korede, no, that's wrong, isn't it? Korede. I'm sorry.
Don't worry about how you say it. It's like it's fine. But yeah, you were saying so Korede. It's
Korede. If she killed the father of them.
Okay, so I don't think of it as a feminist revenge story. And I don't think of it, I mean, it doesn't really, to be honest, I don't think it really matters what I think of it. It's how people receive it. But yeah, I didn't label the book in any particular way. As for whether or not she killed their father, you know what? I'm not entirely sure. Like, I think, I think that, you know, I've told people that, look, what I think happened was that she, you know, she made a move, she had the knife in her hand, he slipped and hit his head, and they didn't call for help. They watched him die. That's kind of how I picture it. But I think some people are more comfortable with the idea of her actually having stabbed him, which is okay too. I don't think it makes a massive difference, because at the end of the day, they could have saved his life and they didn't. So they were definitely, you know, they were definitely involved in his death in an active manner, if that answers the question.
I think it does. Lydia, were there more
Ja,
questions?
ich wollte, eigentlich wäre die Frage ein bisschen mehr im Kontext, aber ich war gerade so gespannt, dabei zuzuhören. I was just listening to you, so I couldn't finish my question. Warte, also mir geht es ja halt eigentlich eher um die Sache, wie das wahrgenommen wird. Also ob das, sie lebt in London, richtig?
Ja, ich glaube jetzt gerade.
Genau, weil ob man darüber nachdenkt beim Schreiben, wie so eine Geschichte, die in Lagos, Nigeria spielt, halt hier in Europa ankommt, weil das ja doch manchmal anders ist, ne? Also ob für uns ist diese Gewalt vielleicht, nicht nur für uns, aber ne, dieses Gehorsame, sich hinknien und solche Sachen, das kennt man ja aus dem europäischen Kontext eher nicht. Und ob das so der Plan war, halt diese feministische, aber sie hat, glaube ich, gerade gesagt, war nicht der Plan, ne? Diese feministische Rache-Story zu schreiben.
Ja, okay.
Genau, das war halt, genau, und ob sie sich im Schreibprozess quasi Gedanken darüber gemacht hat, wie das in Europa ankommt, wenn wir eine Geschichte aus der Sicht, ja, aus einer nigerianischen Sicht sozusagen, eine feministische Geschichte, lange Rede, kurzer Sinn, eine feministische Geschichte schreibt, die ja für uns so anders ist. Weil die Loyalität, darüber haben sich ja einige gefragt, warum ist sie so loyal und sagt nichts. So, ich weiß nicht, ob das übersetzen kann, aber vielleicht hat das mein Gedanke gemacht.
So I think we talked about it a little bit in the beginning, that first of all, you didn't plan for the story to be like internationally known, but I think you said you wrote the story in Nigeria, and Lydia's question was a bit like, did you plan for it to be perceived in any kind of way in Europe, or yeah, but I think you already said you didn't really plan.
I think when I remember I was writing a book years and years ago, and my brother, who was much younger then, I remember him bursting into my room and saying, looking at just a few sentences and saying, oh, is this going to be accessible, you know, internationally or something like that? And I remember thinking, could you just get out of, like, I think I chased him out of my room because I was like, what does this small boy know about whether something is accessible or not? But again, I think it just comes to what I was saying about writing honestly and authentically. That's the story I wanted to write, and I didn't think about whether whose eyes were going to be on it, because I was writing it for me, because not just, you know, whether there would be, you know, whether the UK would be reading it or the US, even other Nigerians, I wasn't sure how they would receive that type of story of a woman killing several men, but it was what I found enjoyable, and it was what I enjoyed writing. So the only person I was really concerned with at that time was me. There were, like I said, there was another story I was working on at the time. That was the story that I was like, okay, this is the one that's going to go to agents. This is the one. So I'm actually really thankful for My Sister, the Serial Killer, because I know that I'm never going to have that level of neutrality again, where it's like, you know, it might be that no one ever reads this book, this story, and that's okay. you know, with every other sort of work that's come out after that, I've either been commissioned, or I know that my agent is going to see it, or I know my editor is going to see it. But this story, you know, as far as I knew, nobody was ever going to read it. So it's probably the most authentic thing I'm ever going to write, if that was the question.
Yeah, thank you. There was like a question right to that, how it was perceived or received in Nigeria.
Yeah, I mean, it's done okay there. Because at the time when the book came out, I was head of drama in my church, and I was like, oh my gosh, the moment they see this book, they're gonna be like, you know, this girl. But nobody flinched, nobody batted an eyelid over the book. So all the worries I had kind of didn't come to fruition.
Yeah, I think we tend to be more in our heads with those kind of things. And oh yeah, another question. Inga, go ahead.
Thank you. First of all, thank you very much for being here with us tonight. You already explained what you didn't expect the book to be like, not a feminist revenge story and all that. So, I think it's super interesting to hear what you described, that you kind of didn't expect it to be received at all, maybe. So what was the main thing that you wanted to express with that story? What's like the essential thing that you took out of it, or maybe a reader should take after reading it?
Thanks for the question. I think I don't have anything that I'm like, you know, for me, the most important thing is I want the reader to enjoy reading it. I want them to enjoy the experience. It's supposed to be, it's not a very heavy book, so it's supposed to be somewhat enjoyable. So I think that's the primary thing I want. As for what my intentions were writing the story, going back to the two poems, there were, I think, two things that I really cared about. One was, I guess, pretty privilege. And, you know, because with that poem, it was really about how, you know, based on how attractive a person, what a really attractive person could get away with, you know, and how the way you were treated by society at large depends on how you look on the outside. So to my mind, I had created this story that was kind of ridiculous, because this girl should have been caught. You know, she's killing, and I don't think they've necessarily gone out of their way to make sure. I mean, I don't feel like Ayala was doing anything to make sure she wasn't going to be caught, aside from calling her sister. And yet she isn't, because nobody could imagine that she would be capable of doing such a thing. So there was a lot of that going on in my mind as I was writing it. Like, how far can I push this? How far can Ayala push it and continue to get away with what she's getting away with? That's one. Two, just, I guess, you know, this woman versus man thing, and allowing my females to get away with some things that I just thought were funny or interesting or curious. And, you know, knowing that, I mean, some of the things they had gone through as young women, or their mom had gone through, and even though they weren't dealing with it in the most healthy way, I know that I said it wasn't a revenge fantasy, because that's not the way I was thinking about it. It was just having these women sort of be women gone wild, you know, just let them do whatever and damn the consequences. And I thought it was entertaining to me, I think.
Yeah, I think it was different for us as well to read this kind of humorous story. We didn't have that for a while, at least. So I really enjoyed this dark humor of this book. Are there any more questions? Inga, did you want to ask more than that question?
Oh, sorry, I didn't see that I unmuted myself. I hope There was no. Yeah, actually, there's another one I'm curious about, and I don't know if it's different for like the English edition or something, but during the book there are a few terms or words or like food and clothing described in the original language, and there's no like glossar at the end of the book or something. So I wondered if this was during the process of publication, if this was a question you thought about, like explaining those terms more detail and yeah, somehow telling the readers more about Nigerian culture.
So I think I did think about it. I thought about it quite a bit. So the stray individual like words, I was fine with them not being translated because I thought it's the easiest thing to Google, and also because the context in the sentence would let you know what it was, even if you didn't know exactly what it looked like. And for my own writing, the way I prefer to write isn't to write a word and then be like, because in English it would be strange if I was like, oh, you know, or if I said croissant and then I'm like, okay, croissant is you know, this, it kind of would pull you out of what was going on. So that was a no-brainer for me. The tougher one was when I think I know of at least one chapter that I had 2 or 3 sentences that were completely in Yoruba, which is Nigeria has several languages, hundreds, but Yoruba is my native tongue. And there were 3 sentences that were just in Yoruba, and I considered translating them because obviously that's a lot, but I didn't because again, I didn't want to pull, I couldn't find a way, I couldn't think of a way to do it elegantly that would, as a writer, appease me. And also because of how intense that particular chapter was, I was like, you know what? A woman might not know what she said, but they'll know what she said. Like they might not know, you know, they might not be able to say, okay, this is exactly what she said, but her emotion and what she's gone through, and they will still get this, they will understand the spirit with which she's saying it, and they'll understand her pain. And I thought that was sufficient for what I needed. It's not really important what she says at that point, which anyway, I'd have to look at it to remember exactly what she said. I think it was something about, you know, you won't, because she's shouting at the mistress, and she basically says, you're not going to step on my head, and you're not, it's kind of very lyrical in Yoruba, just like you're not going to take my home away from me and my, you know, but yeah, but I thought like, you know what, they might not know, people might not know exactly, and it's the majority of people, because even within Nigeria, Yoruba isn't everybody's language, because it's one of hundreds. So I wasn't just potentially alienating non-Black people, but non-Nigerian people. I mean, Nigerian people who weren't Yoruba, non-Yoruba people, if that makes sense.
That's also very interesting. I think that you have very many languages in one country. Someone asked in the chat if you had influence, or if you could, I don't know, have a say in the translation. Were you part of the translations, or?
So some of them, I think I was a part of. Some of them would, because they would want to know, you know, there's some turns of phrase that even though they were in English, they're like, oh, what do you mean by this? Maybe certain things characters said, but not every translation reached out. But some translations did. And I think somebody also asked why Ayola did all these kills. You know what? I feel like it was a way of taking control back. And also because she's, you know, she's a little bit broken. So I think she does it because she can, and she's been getting away with it. And so long as she continues to get away with it, she'll continue to do it. But yeah, I think it was just a way of, I mean, especially with her seeing that her father dying was an end to a potentially disastrous situation, you know, that death made it so she didn't have to go through something I think she just decided it was the answer to her problems, killing people.
Okay, and last question.
Hi. There are a lot of dead men, and I wondered why the police isn't more active, and is it typical for Nigeria?
So, I mean, we have a very interesting relationship with police in Nigeria, and most of it not so good. So it's one of the reasons why it was easy for me to set the story in Nigeria, because I have lived in the UK. I could have studied in the UK, but I was like, you know, all that CCTV and like there's just a lot more to deal with. But Nigeria, I could see. I just think that a lot more crime is unsolved, and you know, the police are not well paid, and there's a lot of corruption within the police force, and you know, they're just it's a problematic area. You know, and in Nigeria we've had NSARS, which SARS is a more militant sort of arm, and they were known for people would disappear, and so there's a very kind of you know, Nigerians don't necessarily look, my first thought if something was happening to me in Nigeria wouldn't be, let me call the cops. That wouldn't be the thought in my, I'd be like, you know, I need to call my husband, or I need to call my, you know, my dad, or I need to call, it would never be, let me call I don't even know what the number is. I don't know if they have I don't know if there's a number to call, have them. So it was very, very easy to do that in the book, because that's kind of the way they are. I wasn't, you know.
So yeah, that's definitely a difference to what we're used to. We get taught the police number in school, or maybe even before that. So,
yeah, I mean, I know the UK number to call the police. I know the UK number to call the ambulance. I know the UK numbers for all of it. But in Nigeria, I don't even think I know the number to call the ambulance. I know there is one, but I don't know what it is. So,
oh wow, yeah. Okay, I thought if you'd like to read more by Oyinkan Braithwaite, there is a really good book. I listened to it, I think, last year, and it's very, well, I don't know, current, I would say, because it takes place in Corona times as well, and I don't remember it as humorous or as lighthearted as My Sister, the Serial Killer, but it's a very interesting story about being trapped in a house, and a very difficult situation, I would say. And I am giving away this copy to one of you, but maybe you, Oyin, would like to share something about this book as well. What's in it for a reader?
yeah, so it's interesting because that book I was commissioned to write it. It's much smaller than My Sister, the Serial Killer, and I was commissioned to write it in the UK for, well, it doesn't look much. When you had it, I was like, it doesn't look much. It is much smaller though. It's like I don't know how they did. The print must be different. Anyway, yeah, I was commissioned to write it for oh, this is crazy. My mind is completely blanking at the moment, but it was, you know, with the intention, the audience was supposed to be adults who struggle with reading, who maybe don't read as much. So it was interesting, actually, Helen, you saying that it was not as lighthearted, because it's actually, it probably should be. I don't know, but yeah, it's a smaller book. It's supposed to be an easy read. Yeah, quick reads. Oh gosh, that's what I did it for. I did it for quick reads. So it's supposed to be an easy, quick read, and I was, you know, commissioned to write it, and I was actually writing it during the pandemic, during the lockdown, and you know, as Helen says, it takes place during the lockdown, and the reason why it's not, I mean, it's not about COVID. It's just set during the lockdown. But the reason I chose to do that was because the story had been on my mind for some time, but I couldn't. So it's basically about, two women who are both claiming the ownership of a baby. They're both saying the baby is theirs, as the title kind of gives it away. They're both saying the baby is theirs. And I had been thinking about this story for some time, but prior to the pandemic, I couldn't work out how to get around, because it's a contemporary story. So I couldn't work out how to get around the issue of DNA. Like, in this day and age, if you say you're the mother, they can just check that. But the lockdown created the right set of circumstances for my characters not being able to do stuff they would normally be able to do. So yeah, that's kind of how that came about. So if you do read it, I hope you enjoy it.
I did enjoy listening to it, and I would say it is an easy and quick read. Just the topic felt more heavy, I would say. Yeah. I'll give that away to one of you, and I'll message you afterwards. And I can highly recommend listening or reading, and I really enjoyed it. Is there another way, another book on its way? Another book we can soon maybe?
Yeah, I'm trying. I'm working hard.
No pressure.
I'm working hard to push it out, but hopefully, it's just the writing process is a bit weird in that sometimes you don't know what the story is until you're done writing it. And I think that's kind of where I am as far as the process.
Okay, we're very much looking forward to that. Thank you very, very much for answering our questions tonight. That was really insightful. Yeah, do you have any more questions? Do you want to know anything?
I mean, oh, sorry, I'm just reading. Thank you, Sabine. I appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, you guys meet up once a month, or how do you?
Yeah, we'll read one in December and January, just because of Christmas, but usually one a month. And there will be like a recap, I would say, on Monday, because that's the last day of the month, to share our opinion, I would say. But yeah, it was a really interesting month. Very interesting to dive. We even cooked Nigerian. So
What did you make? What did you make?
I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but jollof rice.
Okay, jollof. It's jollof. Yeah, it's jollof rice. Okay, and how was it?
Very spicy.
Wait, who made it?
We cooked it together. I just picked up a recipe and we cooked it like online, like this.
Yeah, but you didn't reduce like the pepper or anything. You just.
No, I'll do that next time.
I mean, I like my things really spicy, but yeah, I'm just saying, like, if that's not, okay, fine. That's really cool that you did that. Jollof rice is actually a very heavily contested, in Africa, there are a lot of countries that are arguing about who makes the best jollof rice in Africa, and who first created jollof rice. To really, wars haven't been started, but it's a really heavy what recommendations? Gosh, I don't know. What have I read recently that I've really, I mean, at the moment I'm reading, no, actually, I don't even know. You know what? This is a tough one for me because I'm reading a lot of books at the moment for an award, and I'm not sure if I can say any of those books because I'm reading it for an award. But you know what? If you like the book, a Nigerian book that I usually recommend, is called, let me type it because it's called The Secret Lives of Baba Segi's Wife. The Secret Lives of Baba Segi's Wives. which I think is a hilarious story. Really interesting. So yeah, if you want like something that's kind of funny, based in Nigeria, that's a good read. So yeah, that's a good Nigerian book. I think I really enjoyed that one. And they actually have plays in, I've watched the play in England as well, which was really funny. So it's a good book.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I think we'll let you go now. We
Thank you.
took a bit longer than we planned. But, yeah, thank you for taking the time.
No problem. Have a good night, everybody.
Have a good evening.
Bye bye.